Before we commence proceedings, I wish to acknowledge the presence of the family of the Right Excellent Sir Garfield St. Auburn Soros. This House is in session.
Announcements by Your Honor.
Minutes for the meeting held on Tuesday, 20th of July, 2026, to be confirmed. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be confirmed.
The question is that the aforementioned minutes be confirmed. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are hereby confirmed.
Announcements by Your Honor, Speaker. Messages from His Excellency, the President, petitions, papers, government notices, private members' notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first readings of bills.
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the first reading of the Barbados Diamond Anniversary Honour Bill 2026.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be read the first time. Question is that the aforementioned bill be read the first time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches.
Honourable Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to pay tribute to one of Barbados' finest sons. When a man good, he good. And when a man great, he great. I first heard those words as a small, young, little girl. And like all other Bajans of the time, we felt smart and we felt proud. If I doubted how those words resonated, permit me to share that since the state funeral, and particularly over the course of the last weekend, no less than 7 or 8 people greeted me with that phrase. I understood it to mean not that they were telling me about myself or themselves, but that they were echoing the pride that I shared on behalf of this nation as we spoke, all who spoke at the state funeral on Wednesday, the 29th of July of this year. And I understood then from ordinary people who just touched me. I was in a shop in Eagle Hall on Friday buying something to eat. And the man put his hand through the side window and touched me, and he said, when a man good, he good. And when a man great, he great. And so many other times over the course of the last weekend, that transpired. As I came up Montgomery, by Montgomery Pasture, in the member for St. Michael Norris constituency, right there where the fellas is lying. Same refrain on the weekend. I spend time on this because I want more than anything else to reinforce how a man who did not play a test match for the last 52 years, for more than a half century, has been able to have such a commanding presence and respect in a country. Very often, and those who are more accustomed to doing and presiding over funerals, like persons to my left, will tell you that when people are out of sight for 5 years, 10 years, there's usually a diminished level of participation in the funeral. But in the case of Sir Garfield St. Auburn Sobers, his absence from the cricket field for 52 years as a Test cricketer did not in any way diminish the absolute high regard which his country, his region, and the international community had with him. And let me, as we pay tribute in this honorable house to our national hero, Sir Gary Sobers, say thank you. Thank you to a long list of people. Thank you first to the people of Barbados for truly reflecting and sharing how much this man, his genius, but his character meant to all of us as a people. A living example of what is possible. Thank you to the Caribbean region. From the heads of government to the ordinary persons of the Caribbean region, the outflowing has been tremendous. And thank you to the cricketing world. From India to England to South Africa to Australia, I dare say to everywhere where cricket is played, there was a moment spared for and prayers lifted up for the life. Our commentator, Ian Bishop of this region, said he was sad, but he was glad. Sad that he had passed and glad that he had come. Captured it perfectly in those few words. But the thanks also goes to the family. Matthew, who is not here with us today, regrettably, because he lives outside of Barbados. Daniel, Genevieve, who are with us today with their children, his nephews, niece. Thank you to you all, through you, Mr. Speaker, because you shared with this country your father, your grandfather, your uncle, and you had to share him at a time when your grief is at probably its apex. And that is no easy thing to do, because you are human and you have all of the emotions that come with the loss of someone who is dear and close. But I also want to thank Senator Lisa Cummins, the Cabinet Secretary, and you permit me to call these names, sir, without prior notice, but I do so not as an act of disrespect, but as an act of congratulations and ultimate respect. Senator Lisa Cummins, who led the team with Senator Archer supporting her, but the core team of the Cabinet Secretary, Selma Green, the Clerk of this Parliament, Pedro Eastman, the Permanent Secretary in the Prime Minister's Office, Alice Jordan, the Most Honourable Alice Jordan, the Chief Executive Officer of the National Cultural Foundation, Carol Roberts-Reefer, Mr. Shane Jones, who coordinated the media, and a number of others, and I single out Deputy Commissioner of Police Barry Hunt, and of course the Chief of Staff of the Barbados Defence Force, Brigadier Carlos Lovell. There were others who worked under them and worked diligently. It seemed as though on the morning of the 29th of July that the soldiers marched with a greater verve and dignity, and the police matched them in equal tone. It seemed as though on that day, everybody knew that we were on our best behavior and that we wanted to be the best for the man who was simply the best. Sir, I start there in this very short tribute to be able to reflect the gratitude of a nation and of a parliament. It was in this parliament that the framework, the legislation for the national heroes of this country was first passed. And it is therefore appropriate that in this parliament we come today to pay tribute to one who has fallen, one who has passed. This was a man whose genius, and I'm sure others will regale it today, from the 8,032 runs to the test average, that I am sure that if he was playing as much cricket as others are playing today, that the numbers would even be greater. And I recall a speech that he made in India. And in the question and answer section, this was the same one that I referred to in the tribute at Kensington Oval, where he said his ultimate pride came from playing for country. But they asked him who else since him could be considered among some of the greatest. And with great humility, but with great precision, he said, and I thought, this is exactly how he used the ball. He said, I'm not sure that I can answer that question, because so much of the rules have changed, and so much of the practice has changed, that it is almost effectively impossible to make comparisons over the ages, because the ability to play with a helmet and not face the pace of a Linwall and Miller or Dennis Lilly without the benefit of any protection required a certain amount of courage. And then the rules as to how many bounces you can ball in an over that were clearly introduced by the ICC and the MCC to be able to thwart the West Indies' reign of, I was going to say terror, and then I thought maybe I shouldn't, but since it was echoed already in the chamber, I will say it, reign of terror. The rules were changed once again to literally disadvantage the West Indies in their ability to be able to play the game as it had been played for decades. I remember as a young student in London watching a cricket series called Bodyline that was effectively about England and Australia, long before the West Indies, you know, and the fact that these men used to ball bouncers and how the bouncers used to hit people and knock them down, etc. So that, in a very real sense, Sir Gary was, in his own subtle way, drawing reference to how the rules and the power of the game has been used to be able to thwart the natural advantages that we would have had as West Indians in the game. But I go further, sir. I could dwell on, as I said, all of the accolades and all of the records, the 6 6s, all of them. The ability to play every part and aspect of the game. The only thing he didn't do right was a wicketkeeper. We did everything else. And I'm sure that on occasion he wicketkeeped as well too. I'm being told that. But the only thing that he didn't do consistently, the photographs of him in midair, arms outstretched, catching a ball less than what, 4 or 5 meters from the force with which it left the bat, required extraordinary courage and reflexes and agility. But above all of these things, sir, for me, it was his humility and his patriotism that stood out to define the man who we pay tribute here today. At home, over the course of the last few decades, you would see him whisper sometimes very quietly to a young cricketer, Sometimes I'd be walking downstairs from the president's suite to go with him to the ground for some presentation, and he would just pause and have a quiet word, asking him, how's the game? In a very real sense, doing the thing that we ask people to do most, to see people, to hear people, and to feel people. And that is why I say, for me, his character, more than anything else, stood up to define him as a national hero. Yes, his commitment to excellence, but anchored with a humility and anchored with a compassion that was second to none. Government, sir, can build pavilions, can fund programs, can prepare pitches, but we can't legislate belief. And what Sir Gary did for this country was to make aspiration visible. I want to be the best. I am prepared to practice and to be disciplined enough to become the best. And the notion that you can just use talent without head and talent without the discipline of practice has to be erased from the psyche of our people. And we need, sir, to settle and to create a legacy for Sir Gary that allows the commitment to excellence anchored by the humility of the man to shine bright. I am aware that more than 300 signatures have been submitted to the Cabinet Office for the renaming of the Bay Primary School where he went to school as the Sir Gary Sobers Primary School. I am aware that the matter is to go before the National Honors Advisory Council. But I would be surprised if there was anybody in Barbados who would find any difficulty whatsoever with the immortalizing of a man from the Bayland for his name to be attached to the school that will be responsible for the rearing of the majority of children coming from that community, and whose name will stand forever as inspiration for those young boys and girls to believe and to know that it is possible to be born where they were born, to be raised where they were raised, to go to school where they go to school, and to achieve global excellence. There could be no more long-lasting and fitting tribute, because it goes generation after generation after generation after generation. In addition to that, the government has determined that the best way to also reinforce that memory, not just for the primary school children of Bay Primary, but for all school children in this country, is to publish a book, a small pocket book called 365 Not Out. One lesson and message for each day of the year, and the not out will be the 366 for the leap year. And that book should reflect all the lessons that our citizens need to walk with, to instill in themselves, and to remain committed to throughout their lives. And I hope and pray that by the beginning of next year, we will have that book available and published to be able to give every single school child in this country, and to continue so to do as a rite of passage through the school system in Barbados, but equally as important, as many of us do, to keep with us throughout life. Sir, many people use other books. Some are religious, some are motivational. We have the capacity to produce one that is reflected in an image, an example of Sir Garfield Sobers. And I am happy that the government has agreed so to do. The truth is, history will forever record Sir Gary as not out. Your runs can be counted, but the generations that he will inspire cannot be counted. And it is our duty, just as it was when we made him a national hero 28 years ago, it is our duty to ensure that his life and his example is forever celebrated in this country. The United States of America celebrated this year 250 years of independence. George Washington can never be separated from that. Thomas Jefferson can never be separated from that. And I say these things because we must not believe that the only people capable of greatness are political persons. And that was one of the reasons why we were so focused when we set the framework for national heroes in 1998 to include Sir Gary. As I told you in the state funeral, there was a lot of debate at the time. Do we have persons who are still living? Do we have persons who, some people in the community said he was just a cricketer. He was never just a cricketer. He was always the greatest of all time. And he was always a Barbadian man exhibiting some of the best values that this country could have. He enjoyed life, but enjoying life does not diminish your ability to reflect the best values that you have. And we refer glibly all the time to Queen Elizabeth knighting him at the Garrison Savannah. But if you know enough about statecraft and about Buckingham Palace, you would know, sir, that it was an extraordinary gesture of high respect for Her Majesty not only to agree to knight him, but to come within less than a mile from where he was born to bestow that accolade and to have his investiture done in the face of all who raised him and all who celebrated him and all who already felt long before the knighthood and long before the national hero status that this was the greatest man ever to play the game. Sir, I have spoken as Prime Minister on every occasion. Permit me to speak at a personal level now. Anyone who knows me knows that from the collar up, back through to pretending to be Sir Gary when you're a child batting, right through, and if there's any Bajan boy or girl who like cricket that never pretend to be Gary Sobers, then they ain't nobody. You know what I'm saying? All who pretended to be somebody from overseas, they ain't born about here. But the member for Christchurch West will recall that at a school, a primary school that we went to school at, in fact, I now reflect on the fact the only thing that I do left-handed is to bat. Everything else I do right-handed. Now, I'm not sure whether that was forced in on me, or I begin to wonder whether the batting of the left-handed was something that I adopted as a young girl, hoping that everything from the collar to the batting left-handed, that everything would allow me to get that much closer to a man who we saw as larger than life. The member for Christchurch West was at primary school with me, and we all used to play cricket on the hill. It was an amazing thing because as a left-hander, it meant that any shot I played on the leg side would go over the wall and you would immediately be out because you had to climb over the wall to get the ball. And the leg side was probably no more than about 40 feet from where you were batting. So that you had to learn as a left-hander to play shots on the offside. But I say these things because when all is said and done, we all know it is about how someone makes you feel and leaves you feeling. And Gary Sobers, on every occasion, I had the honor, and I say the honor because that is what it was, to engage with him as a little girl, as a young woman, and as Prime Minister. I can say to you that at no stage did I feel other than in awe of this man. Former Permanent Secretary Lionel Weeks spoke at the Legends on the Monday night before the state funeral. And Sir Hilary Beckles spoke as well, and he described Sir Gary, as did P.S. Weeks, as an intellectual. And I believe truly he was. For him to be able to understand velocity and angle and all of the other things that he could read that other cricketers and other human beings didn't see and don't read with the speed with which he did, reflects not instinct, but intellect and ability, in my view. And we often take a lot of things for granted. Look at this building. The people who built this building without the technology that exists today had to understand mathematics and physics. The carpenters in our midst who never went to university, but who can build trusses in a roof with perfection, implicitly understood physics and maths. I believe Sir Gary was such a person. And let us be very clear. I grew up in a Barbados where people sought to make fun of Sir Gary because of his command of the English language. Mercifully, we live in a Barbados now that accepts nation language. And there is a story that was once told, and when I asked him about it, he smiled and he laughed. He said, "You heard about that?" And it was a person who was trying to put him under some pressure about his English language. And Sir Gary's simple quip was, "I never set out to be the best English speaker in the world." And the person who he said that to should feel small, small, small. Because implicit in that statement was, what I set out to achieve, I achieved. I set out to be the greatest cricketer the world has ever seen. And I say this as a message to our people. Because too often in this country, people are looked down upon because they don't talk in the same way, they don't look the same way, they don't sound the same way. And this country must forever be that place that accommodates people. It doesn't mean that we should accommodate things that undermine values or respect. But the things that came to be associated with a colonial Barbados that sought not to see so many of our people and to listen to so many of our people cannot be the way in which we go forward as a nation, because we need every single Barbadian. And it's ironic because Christianity tells us that every one of us is precious. in the eyes of the Lord. And therefore, if we are truly to live the Christian faith, and if we are to be also accommodating of other faiths that also reflect the same message, then it is important that in our everyday living, that we do like Sagari, and we pause and we ask that little child, how you play today? How was your game? Be able to see all and not pass judgment because of where a person is born, what they look like, or how they sound or speak. It is of significance that the remaining national hero of this country, like Sagari, was also born on the outskirts of Bridgetown in humble circumstances. It is significant that both of them came to achieve greatness in the eyes of the world, not just of Bajans or Caribbean people. And it is pleasing to me that I was able to bring together both of them. I think it was the 29th of December 2019 when they first met, and to allow both of them to appreciate and respect the genius of each other. We have lost a great Barbadian, but he shall never be erased from our memory. And the actions which we take as a government, and I make it clear that I support the petition by the residents of the Bayland, but the other actions that we take to celebrate him and his life must not be to simply reflect on him and his record, but must always be a platform to see where the next Gary Sobers is going to come from, where the next Robin Rihanna Fenty is going to come from. Because in our midst, just as they have emerged to be able to be the best in a global population of 8 billion, I have every confidence that we are in a position to see others attain these heights over the course of their lives. Mr. Speaker, it is with absolute honor that I pay tribute to one of the greatest Barbadians ever to have lived, and that I ask formally that a resolution of this Honourable Chamber, which I shall now read, be passed. Whereas the Right Excellent Sir Garfield St. Albans Sobers, Knight Bachelor, National Hero of Barbados, Officer of the Order of Australia, and member of the Order of the Caribbean Community, passed this life on the 17th day of July 2026, 11 days shy of his 90th birthday. And whereas this distinguished son of the soil, born in the city of Bridgetown in the Bayland on the 28th day of July 1936, the fifth of 6 children of Shamont and Thelma Sobers, rose from the humblest of origins to become, by universal acclaim, the greatest all-round cricketer the game has ever known. And whereas he first represented the West Indies in March 1954, at the age of 17 years, and in a test career spanning 20 years, amassed 8,032 runs at an average of 57.78 and took 235 wickets in 93 test matches, and in first-class cricket scored in excess of 28,000 runs and captured more than 1,000 wickets. And whereas at Kingston, Jamaica in 1958, at the age of 21 years, he made 365 not out against Pakistan, then the highest individual score in the history of Test cricket, a record which stood for 36 years before it was surpassed by another son of the Caribbean, Brian Charles Lara. And whereas at Swansea in Wales on the 31st day of August 1968, playing for Nottinghamshire against Glamorgan, he struck 6 sixes in a single over a feat of audacity and mastery which endures among the most celebrated moments in the annals of the game. And whereas he captained the West Indies from 1965 to 1972 and was chosen to lead the rest of the World 11 in 1970, and by his conduct both on and off the field of play, carried the name of Barbados and of the Caribbean with honor into every cricketing country of the world. And whereas at the Melbourne Cricket Ground in January 1972, leading the rest of the world against Australia, he scored 254 runs in an innings which Sir Donald Bradman described as the best innings he had ever seen. And whereas he was created a Knight Bachelor by Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II at the Garrison Savannah in February 1975 and was named a National Hero of Barbados in 1998 and accorded the style and title of the Right Excellent. And whereas he was adjudged a Cricketer of the Century by Wisden Cricketers Almanac in the year 2000 and was inducted into the ICC Cricket Hall of Fame in 2009, and whereas his name is borne in perpetuity by the Sir Garfield Sobers Trophy, awarded annually since 2004 to the ICC Men's Cricketer of the Year and by the Sir Garfield Sobers Sports Complex in this island. And whereas in the years when this country moved from colony to independent nation, his genius gave to a young people the priceless gift of belief, standing as living proof that excellence of the highest order could come from these shores. And whereas for all the magnitude of his achievement, he remained a man of singular humility, courtesy, and generosity, who greeted the head of state and the taxi driver, the celebrated and the child seeking an autograph with the same smile and the same respect, and who gave freely of his time to the encouragement of young sportsmen and sportswomen, be it resolved that this Honourable House pay the accolade of its highest tribute to the late, the Right Excellent Sir Garfield St. Alban Sobers, National Hero of Barbados, as an exemplar of excellence, dignity, humility, and grace, and record its profound gratitude for a life which brought unmeasured honor and joy to this nation and to the people of the Caribbean. And be it further resolved, Mr. Speaker, that this Honourable House share the sorrow felt by a grateful nation and extend its deepest sympathies to his children Matthew, Daniel, and Genevieve, to his brother Cecil, to his grandchildren, to his other relatives and dear friends, and express its wish that they be comforted by the memory of a life lived selflessly and in service of his nation and his people. Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Member St. Michael South Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to add my voice and my own sentiments to this resolution, to this debate, and certainly to the words of the Honourable Member, the Honourable Prime Minister, who led. I rise, sir, to join in paying tribute to a man that this nation, and in fact the world, has spent the last weeks mourning and at once celebrating in equal measure. The Right Excellent Sir Garfield St. Alban Sobers, National Hero of Barbados. Sir, much has already been said, and much more will be said today and on other days about Sir Gary the cricketer. The records will be recited again: 365 not out, 6 sixes in an over, 93 tests, 235 wickets, and, sir, a captaincy that changed how the world saw us. Those records, sir, deserve to be recited. They are extraordinary, and I do not diminish them by choosing not to dwell on them today. But, sir, I want to use my contribution this morning to speak about Sir Gary not primarily as a sportsman, but, sir, as a case study, the clearest one this country has ever produced in what happens when a nation's poorest and most overlooked children are given a genuine chance. Because that, Mr. Speaker, is the actual story of his life. And I believe it is the tribute that he would want me to share with this House. Sir, let me say plainly at the outset that I never had the privilege of watching Sir Gary bat in his pomp. I belong to a generation for whom his batting lives only in grainy footage and in the stories all the Barbadians still tell. My grandmother was one of them. With exactly the same reverence every single time, as though the innings happened yesterday. But not having seen him play, sir, never once diminished my admiration for him. Because cricket has never been a distant thing to me. I have followed the game closely my whole life, taught by that same grandmother. One of the things a lot of Barbadians do not realize is that women of a certain generation, with the radios next to their ear as they moved about the house and the yard, women of a certain generation were actually the ones that passed on love of cricket to their future generations. And so I had that privilege. My father's mother, and then my father, encouraged in me a love of the game. So I followed it closely my whole life, the way so many Barbadians do, as something close to a second faith. And I had something better still than having watched him play. I knew him as his member of parliament, and if I'm being honest, simply as an admirer of what he represented. I made it my business, and I had the pleasure of being invited to visit him on his birthday and on other occasions in the year that mattered to him and to St. Michael South Central. I'm not going to pretend, sir, that those visits were anything other than what they were, a privilege. To sit with a man who had done what he had done, and to find him on each occasion gracious and unfailingly interested in the people and the place around him. And that is something that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. While I had the pleasure of hearing firsthand some of Sir Gary's cricket stories, later on, I also found that he was less eager to talk about those things and more eager to talk about me, to talk about the community. He would ask me, how are the rest treating you? And he was making reference to some of his friends and my own colleagues in this honorable place. And he would want to know how I was getting on in the business of service to the people of this country. But sir, let me start my tribute where his story starts, and where mine, in a sense, meets his. Sir Gary was born in Bridgetown in 1936, one of 6 children, and we know the story of the loss that his family experienced early on, of Shimon and Thelma Sobers. Now, he grew up, as we know, in St. Michael South in the Bayland, which is the constituency next to my own. And when he was 5 years old, his father, a seaman serving with the Canadian Merchant Navy, was killed when a ship was torpedoed during the Second World War. And Thelma Sobers was left to raise those children alone in wartime Barbados on a working woman's means, on a working class family's means, I should say. And I asked this House to sit with that for a moment. The greatest cricketer the world has ever produced began his life as a fatherless boy in a large working class household. Precisely the child that our systems, then and now, are most likely to overlook. But Sir Gary was from the start multi-talented. He played basketball, he played table tennis, and at just 15 years old, he was a goalkeeper for Notre Dame Football Club. Good enough, by his own account, to go an entire season without conceding a single goal. That is the story that he tells. I share that detail deliberately, Mr. Speaker, because it matters to the story that I want to tell as I pay this tribute today. This was not a child who drifted into cricket for lack of anything else to do. He was already exceptional at other sports, and in the case of football, at another sport entirely. So why cricket? The official accounts many of us have read in the tributes these past weeks tell us that a severe leg injury ended his football career and turned him toward cricket. That may well be part of the truth, but it is not the whole truth, and I think that Sir Gary deserves the last word on his own life. He tells us that it was not an injury, but a choice. And he tells us that cricket offered him something football at that time did not. And that was a chance to explore the world, to travel far beyond these shores. That was a young man's calculation about where a poor Barbadian boy's talent could actually take him. And it turned out to be exactly right. But Mr. Speaker, here's a part of that same conversation that I consider the most important thing that Sir Gary has ever said publicly about his own life. More important in some ways than any score he has ever made. He did not tell us that he rose through sheer individual brilliance alone. He told us about the people who put him in a position to be seen. Sir Gary spoke of a groundsman named Frank, who used to carry him around on his bicycle to different grounds so that the young sobers could get a game. He spoke of a Captain Farmer who enrolled him in the police band, not because Sir Gary had any particular gift for music, but because band membership was the door that let him play for the police cricket team, a stronger standard of cricket than a poor boy from St. Michael's South could otherwise have reached. And he credited Sir Captain Farmer, alongside the former West Indies captain Dennis Atkinson, with opening the doors that eventually carried him to the highest level of the game. Mr. Speaker, that is the whole argument that is a part of this tribute I want to make to this House today, and I make it deliberately as a part of this tribute in the shadow of his memory. Frank, the groundsman, did not have institutional power. He had a bicycle and the will to use it. Captain Farmer didn't have a formal pathway for Sir Gary. He didn't have a formal pathway to offer a talented poor child. None existed. So he built one that he improvised through the police band because he refused to let that talent go to waste. And if you hear Sir Gary tell the story, he talks about how he used to play around with the bugle. He just used to pretend to blow it, to show up at practice and make it look as if he was doing something, because being a part of that police band was his doorway to the game that he loved. But sir, there is a more precise way still to understand what he was up against in those days. And it is not only his own memory that tells us so. For most of the 20th century, the established route into top-level Barbadian and West Indies cricket ran through a small number of elite secondary schools. Harrison College, Combermere, and the Lodge School chief among them. And those schools' cricket programs, coaching, and let us call it out, those schools' old boys networks, fed directly into the island's leading clubs. And if I recall, I believe that not only did those schools have Division I teams, but you would find that the Combermere boys would end up with Empire, Harrison College might end up at Spartan, and so that path was automatically created. This is documented history. And those of us who study the game carefully would know that it is the subject of a full academic study, Keith Sandiford's Cricket Nurseries of Colonial Barbados, that covers precisely the years of Sir Gary's rise. In that same conversation where Sir Gary tells us about this, he says plainly that he did not have Harrison College and Combermere behind him the way others of his era did. He didn't have that gate, but he had Frank's bicycle, and he had Captain Farmer's police band. But sir, while we are thankful for those avenues, We know that a nation can't build its future on happening to be fortunate. Mr. Speaker, talent is distributed evenly across this island, across every parish, across working class communities, and other kinds of communities. But opportunity is not. What Frank and Captain Farmer did for Gary Sobers by instinct and by generosity and by improvisation, this government, our government, this parliament has a duty to do systematically and as a matter of policy for every child in Barbados today who has that same talent, but who does not today have that visibility. That means investment in community-level sport. I re-emphasize this at every opportunity, because the only way that we can have national teams and national players in anything is if they emerge at the community level. So investment in community-level sport, in scouting and in identification, in transport and equipment for children whose families cannot provide them, and in structured pathways from the playing field to the national program that do not today have to depend on a groundsman's bicycle or on an officer's goodwill. I want to emphasize at this point, though, sir, that there will always be a need for the Franks and the Captain Farmers. There will always be a role for them to help young people along and to have relationships with all of us that are not structured and not formal. But it is also the responsibility of a government to be able to support and encourage those pathways. That isn't sentiment, Mr. Speaker, that is the literal stated lesson of Sir Gary Sobers' own account of his own rise. But sir, it goes further than sport. If a boy of Sir Gary's gifts could be shut out of the very schooling that produced his era's other great cricketers, we will then have to ask ourselves how many other gifts this country has shut out the same way over the years. In mathematics, in science, in the arts, in leadership, simply because a child's family could not open the right school door. And that is precisely the gap the education reform now underway in this country is meant to close. And Sir Gary's own account of his life is as strong a piece of evidence as this House will ever hear for why we will not tire in that work and why that work must be finished. From there, the record does speak for itself, sir, although it deserves more than a passing mention, and I will go quickly through this. He joined club cricket at 13. He made his first class debut at 16. He played his first test for the West Indies at 17. Not yet as the batsman the world would come to know him as, but as a promising young left-arm spin bowler. So Gary will tell you how he started out at number 9 or number 7 in the batting order. So he came as a promising young left-arm spin bowler, and within a few short years, he had become something the sport has never seen before or since. At just 21 years old, against Pakistan in 1958, he scored 365 runs without being dismissed, breaking a test record that has stood since 1938, and that record, as we know, was held by England's own Len Hutton, a record set before the Second World War. Broken 20 years later by a boy from the Bayland. He remains to this day the youngest man ever to hold that record. He was at once a bowler across 3 distinct disciplines, and I will not be distracted into analyzing the state of bowling in cricket today. But Sir Gary was a bowler at once across 3 disciplines. He was orthodox spin, wrist spin and googlies, and genuine fast medium pace. And one of the finest slip fielders of his generation, sir, a complete cricketer in a way the game has never produced before or since. And then in 1968, playing a county match for Nottinghamshire against Glamorgan, he did something no batsman in the history of the sport had ever done. 6 balls in a single over, 6 sixes, 36 runs, gone in under 2 minutes. It had never been done before him. It stood alone and matched for decades after. Sir Gary captained the West Indies from 1965 to 1972, succeeding the great Frank Worrell. And he talks about how it felt for him to be called to Jamaica that first time and to look around and see Sir Frank Worrell and others around him. And you'll hear him say in conversations or in interviews that he has done that he looked around himself and he said to himself, "Ah, boy, you made it." But he succeeded Frank Worrell, the first man to hold that captaincy on a permanent footing rather than as a concession. And those years ran almost exactly alongside this region's own political awakening. Barbados itself gained independence in 1966 in the very middle of Sir Gary's captaincy. And I want us to appreciate the importance of that moment. And so Sir Gary's first series in charge saw West Indies beat Australia for the first time in our history, reclaiming the Frank Worrell Trophy in front of a world that had never before had to take us that seriously. And sir, you know, the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northeast, the Honourable Prime Minister who spoke before me, talked about how if you weren't pretending to be Sir Gary, you weren't doing anything. The fact is that there are other generations for which Sir Gary, who did not grow up watching Sir Gary. But he was always a presence in our homes and in our lives. My father is a church man. Most of what he sings are hymns, walking around the house. But he would always be singing that Sparrow song, "Australia lost, the West Indies is boss, the trophy belongs to us." And the pride that he felt, and every time Australia lost, he sang it, even when it didn't lose against the West Indies. Because that was how Barbadians felt about that record, about that moment. Sir, at that time, the West Indies cricket team was, and remains, a single side drawn from many separate nations across this region. And during that era, sir, it became one of the first institutions on earth where the Caribbean region proved undeniably, on a stage the old empire itself had built and cared about more than anything else it possessed, that we were not lesser, not in application, not in intellect, not in courage, and not in class. Sir Gary, as the finest player the game has ever produced, was that proof in its most complete and undeniable form. Sir, the honors that followed his knighthood in 1975, presented in person by Queen Elizabeth II during a royal visit to an already independent Barbados, his naming by an act of this very Parliament in 1998 as one of only 11 national heroes of Barbados at the time, were simply the institutions catching up. Were simply those institutions catching up to what the people of this country had already known for a generation. This House has made this judgment about Sir Gary once before. Today is not a new claim on his behalf. It is a continuation of one that this Parliament has already settled. Mr. Speaker, before I move toward a close, I want to speak about something I don't know has been said in the midst of all of the tributes of the last couple weeks. And that is what Sir Gary made possible for those who came after him. People who mean as much to me personally as a lifelong follower of the game as he came to mean to this House as a national hero. Consider Malcolm Marshall, also a son of St. Michael, and by the judgment of most who watched him, and some of my colleagues in this chamber all know how I feel about the game and the legacy of Malcolm Marshall. But by the judgment of most who watched him, the greatest fast bowler this game has ever produced. His father, a policeman, was killed in a road accident when Malcolm was still a baby. And like Sir Gary, he was raised in a working household by his mother and his grandfather, without the connections that came with privilege. Malcolm Marshall terrorized the finest batsman on earth for the better part of 2 decades. In West Indies sides that the whole cricketing world just assumed by then to be the best in it. That assumption was not always there, sir. Sir Gary's generation had to fight, series by series, to establish it. Malcolm Marshall's generation inherited it and only had to defend it. That is not a small thing to hand down to a boy from St. Michael coming after you. Sir Gary did not simply play brilliant cricket, Mr. Speaker. He built the ground that the next boy from St. Michael and other generations could stand on. And the line runs, sir, all the way down to the team that represents us today. Shea Hope, our current one-day international and T20 captain, a Barbadian wicketkeeper batsman with more than 150 caps for West Indies and closing in on 20 centuries in that format, plays a version of this game that exists in real part because Sir Gary first made the world take West Indian cricket seriously enough to build something that would be worth inheriting. I want to place something on record here, sir. I'm sure many of us have seen it. 2 days after Sir Gary passed, on the 20th of July, West Indies met New Zealand in a one-day international at the Kensington Oval, the very ground that bears the Sir Garfield Sobers Pavilion, the very ground where he made his name. Both of the teams wore black armbands. Both sides stood for a minute's silence before a ball was bowled. And West Indies came desperately close to winning that match for him, falling agonizingly short by a single wicket, and I could still feel the pain in my bowels, sir. Afterwards, Shea Hope did not speak first about the defeat. He said, and I quote, "Unfortunately, we couldn't get that win for the great man." Mr. Speaker, that is a quote from a young Barbadian cricketer born 19 years after Sir Gary had already retired from the game, telling the country, without being asked, that he still felt like he owed Sir Gary something on the very ground where it all began. The thread runs, sir. I never saw Sir Gary bat in person, Mr. Speaker, but I've watched Shea Hope bat more times than I can count, and I've admired Malcolm Marshall's bowling more times than I can count besides. That, I would suggest to this House, is what a legacy actually looks like. Not a pavilion alone, we have that too, and we have other markers of his legacy, but a living, breathing sense of debt and gratitude felt by men and women who never saw him play either, carried forward onto the very soil where he first carried it himself. Mr. Speaker, when Sir Gary left us, it felt like an almost palpable withdrawal of greatness and love and care and friendship and all the other things many of us enjoyed from this earth. And sir, that line from Sir Gary to those like Malcolm Marshall to those like Shea Hope does not run through the men's game alone. Hayley Matthews is also a constituent of St. Michael's South Central, just as Sir Gary himself became. Before she was ever a cricketer, she was a javelin thrower good enough to win gold at the Carifta Games. Another gifted Barbadian forced like Sir Gary with his football to choose between 2 sports she excelled at. And like him, she chose cricket. Today, Hayley Matthews stands at the very top of the world game. the #1 ranked women's T20 all-rounder on the planet, the ICC's own Cricketer of the Year, and captain of the West Indies women's team. When my constituents point with pride at Sir Gary's memory, as they often do, many of them are in the very same breath pointing at Haley Matthews' training on those same grounds today. It's not a coincidence that I take lightly, Mr. Speaker, and I do not think this House or this country should either. The door that Sir Gary forced open all those years ago did not stay open for men's cricket alone. And that is real progress, and that is real legacy. That door stayed open long enough, sir, and wide enough for the women's game to walk through it too. And St. Michael South Central has now given this country both ends of that story. In his later years, sir, Sir Gary's great sporting passion became golf, pursued with the same relentless appetite for mastery that had carried him through every discipline before it. And eventually, the cricket stories became golf stories for those of us who would talk with him. And when his playing days were done, and the whole world was genuinely open to him, he came home. He chose to live not merely in Barbados, but specifically in St. Michael South Central. He grew up next door in St. Michael South, became a global icon, and then, in the fullness of his fame, chose to spend his later years among the very people I have the honor to represent in this House. I knew him, my constituents knew him, not as a legend at a distance, but as a neighbor. It is an honor, sir, to make this presentation in tribute to Sir Gary, and it is my duty as his Member of Parliament to be able to rise to make it in a unique way that acknowledges him as a member of our community and that acknowledges his family, Matthew, Daniel, Genevieve, Cecil, his brother, and grandchildren, and other members of his family, that acknowledges his family as part of our community. You know, when people called in the wake of his passing, and I say this because I haven't said this through you, Sir Daniel, to you before, but many constituents and members of the community had such concern for the family, feeling as if you were part of us, and feeling as if Sir Gary was being fully embraced, and constituents of St. Michael South Central feel special. They feel, oh, okay, yes, y'all can have him, but he is from our community. And that is something that they made very clear and they feel very proud of. And they also feel, as I do, that it must have been quite a sacrifice, and we take it quite as a gift, for him to have been given by you to the country and to the world. That level of performance and service, and to hear Sir Gary talk about how it was never about him, it was always about whomever he was representing, his country, the West Indies, even a club. That calls for quite a bit of sacrifice and to be on that journey with him, and we thank you for that. Mr. Speaker, the tribute that this House owes to Sir Gary's memory is not only ceremonial, it's not only a matter of moving of emotion or the observing of a moment's silence, however deserved. The real tribute is to keep open and to widen deliberately as policy the door that a groundsman's bicycle and a police captain's improvisation through a police band once held open for a young boy from the Bayland. Every child in this country with that same talent deserves better than to depend on the same luck that he depended on. And we hold that challenge as a parliament, as a government, central to our policy and to everything that we do. We hold the commitment, just like Frank did, and just like that police captain did, to be able to see people that would otherwise not be seen, and to develop policy for them and to develop programs for them. So Gary didn't inherit opportunity. It was created for him by people who chose to see him. And he spent the rest of his life proving that that trust was not misplaced, and then passing it forward in the whispers to other players, as you heard the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northeast make reference to. And then whether he ever meant it to or not, pass it forward in legacy to Marshall, to Hope, to Matthews, and to every Barbadian cricketer or athlete or musician or anybody else bearing a talent. This Parliament and this nation now owe the same act of creation to whomever comes next. Wherever in Barbados that child is growing up today, not yet seen. Rest well, Sir Gary. Barbados, the Caribbean, and the world are larger because you passed through them. And St. Michael South Central was fortunate enough in the end to be the place that you called home. And somewhere on a school ground in this country today, unseen, is the next Marshall or the next Hope or the next Matthews or the next Sir Gary, waiting only for a Frank, a Captain Farmer, or this Parliament to notice. And I call on us all to let it be us that notices and that keeps that door open. Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Member for St. James South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I'm happy to join my colleagues in giving a tribute to the Right Excellent Sir Garfield Sobers. He was a man that demonstrated a combination of skills, and his genius clothed us in glory and dignity. And that glory and dignity was not only extended to Barbados, but to our West Indian community, to our diaspora across the world, and to Black people everywhere. He helped us to hold our heads high and feel a sense of pride and a sense of dignity because of who he was for us. But his greatness was not simply the result of physical talent. So the question is, who was this cricketer? What made him the greatest of all time? What was it that made him great? He demonstrated a combination of multiple intelligences that enabled him to excel as a cricketer and as a leader. Based on the theory of multiple intelligences, we can identify several forms of intelligence that contributed to who he was and what he was able to achieve. One of the most visible of his intelligences was his bodily kinesthetic intelligence. That means he had exceptional hand-eye coordination. He had absolute mastery of batting, bowling, and fielding. The ability to control his body movements with precision. Outstanding athleticism, balance, agility, and fitness. And this enabled him to execute a wide range of cricketing skills that made him the all-rounder that we so admire today. But it was not only his kinesthetic intelligence, he had spatial intelligence. Sobers demonstrated a remarkable understanding of space and positioning, precise ball placement when batting, the ability to identify gaps in the field, to anticipate the trajectories of the ball, and strategic field positioning and awareness. This intelligence allowed him to score runs efficiently and make outstanding fielding plays. Along with that, he also had logical mathematical intelligence. Cricket requires constant analysis and decision-making, reading bowlers and predicting deliveries, calculating risk versus reward, planning innings strategically, adapting tactics according to match conditions. His intelligent approach to crafting victories reflects strong analytical thinking and problem-solving abilities. But one of the things that we have admired and that people spoke about was his person, his character, where he showed a deep understanding of his own strengths and his limitations, his ability to maintain confidence under pressure, to be able to exhibit self-discipline and emotional control. And these came from his deep self-awareness, which flows from out of his intrapersonal intelligence. But he was more than just the all-rounder. He was a leader that was able to lead a team and inspire people to victory. And therefore, his interpersonal intelligence came into play because he was such a good team player. And he demonstrated strong social intelligence. He inspired his teammates. He understood team dynamics. He communicated effectively. And he was constantly motivating others. His leadership was built on the ability to connect with and to influence people. But one of the things that is highly unusual is his ability to exhibit strategic intelligence. And every elite athlete does not necessarily possess it. Elite performers use strategic intelligence to be the best. And he demonstrated that when he read the flow of a match, making tactical adjustments, understanding your opponent's weaknesses, and creating winning opportunities. That's how he was able to craft for the West Indies so many victories, because there's no way to anticipate everything that will happen in a game. There's no way to anticipate how you should respond to every single thing that shifts in a game. But he was quick and he was fast because he had these multiple intelligences that were finely honed and used to be able to move cricket to its ultimate best and to become the world's best. So, in Sir Garfield Sober's excellence, what we see is the integration of several intelligences. And what makes him extraordinary was it was not just one intelligence alone, but the seamless combination of his physical, cognitive, emotional, and strategic abilities that allowed him to perform at a level that few athletes have ever been able to reach. His life and his example, therefore, begs a question. How can we develop the full potential of every child? Sir Garfield Sobers provides a powerful model because his greatness emerged not from a narrow academic path, but from the development of multiple intelligences, character, discipline, creativity, and excellence. The challenge for us in Barbados is this. Annually, our secondary school system releases around 3,000 students, of which 30% leave with 3 or less CXCs. And if you think about that, 1,000 not really gaining CXCs in sufficient quantities to help them with the rest of their journey. And you think about that over 10 years, that's over 10,000 young people that we have failed to help them to identify their intelligences, develop their skills and potential to become the best that they can be. That is a serious loss to our country. It means that they approach life unprepared to gain meaningful employment with growth prospects. And if they are successful, it is probably a job that is earning minimum wage. We have not yet been able to help all of our children to identify that intelligence and give them the support, the resources, the training, the information to be able to develop it and use it as a path for their own personal success. Now, we do not create intelligence. God gifted every child from birth with their own gifts of intelligence. We just simply failed to develop them. And we owe those children restitution. Restitution. As was shared by the speaker before me, Sobers had one or two people who were able to help open the door and keep it open for him to be able to emerge. But I believe God allowed him to emerge and become the greatest of all time, to signal to us that we need to do something different as a country to ensure that we capture the potential and the ability of all of our children and to enable them to succeed. And so it is important what we are doing in terms of education transformation, not only at primary and secondary, but we're also pursuing transformation at the level of tertiary education, because this is going to be important. Many educational systems were designed in the industrial area, and their primary focus was on literacy, numeracy, etc., to be able to do a job. But while these basic things may be important for the success of our Republic, Barbados, in the 21st century, we are going to depend more and more and more on a wider range of capabilities that Sir Garfield Sobers exhibited throughout his life. Critical and creative thinking, collaboration and leadership, emotional intelligence, entrepreneurship, problem solving, adaptability, communication. These are the things that our country will have to rely on, and therefore we must change how we prepare our young people for the opportunities that lie before them. If we judge people primarily by their examination performance, we will overlook the talents that would make them exceptional athletes or artists or innovators or scientists or entrepreneurs or craftsmen or community leaders. The goal of education should be to discover and develop excellence in every child, not merely to sort them out based on academic abilities. That is why, and I'm still of the view, that is why our school system still needs centers of excellence. Because if we identify the intelligences which our people have, then we must have available to them the type of school experience that helps to focus them on the development of that area. I remember I was discussing education with a non-education person some time ago, a few years back. And they said something that absolutely stunned me. I was talking about how important it is that young people get the opportunity to have extra lessons so they can build up the areas where they are weak. He said to me, no, extra lessons should be given in the area of their strengths so that they can reach the height of creativity and excellence in the area that is so natural to them. All they need from the other studies are the basic handful of skills and knowledge that support that base potential. Enough English, enough maths, enough whatever. They don't have to be stars in those areas. What they must be, stars in the area of their potential. And this is the change that we need to see in our educational system. Now, the Ministry of Technical and Vocational Training is a new ministry, and we have been tasked to produce a wide range of technological and vocational skills that will broaden the choices which will develop the multiple intelligences of our children and our people. We will not only produce persons with competencies in a wide range of areas, but we will also ensure that we bolster them with the social and emotional learning, the digital skills, the financial literacy, the problem solving, the conflict management, all of the additional set of skills that help them to be successful in whatever environment they may seek to function. We intend in the Ministry of Technological and Vocational Training to adopt a multiple intelligence approach to how we train this next generation of our children, so that they're able to develop their linguistic intelligence, their logical and mathematical intelligence, their spatial, their musical, their kinesthetic intelligence, interpersonal, their naturalistic, whatever level of intelligence they have been gifted with, we want to be able to help them develop it and be able to chart a career path that will take them on to excellence and so be a credit to their nation in the way in which Sagari was a credit to us and will be for many years to come. So for our ministry, talent discovery is a national priority. Our institutions will seek to identify and nurture our students' strengths and ensure that they can meet global standards. And better than that, set global standards in the way that Sagarfield did for us. Students should have opportunity to explore sports and visual arts and performing arts, coding and technology, agriculture, environmental stewardship and leadership. The question that we should be asking, it must shift from what subjects is this person good at? That question has to move, and we have to shift to in what ways is this person intelligent? And once we can do that, we'll be able to give them a personalized path towards their own development. Now, Sobers wasn't only talented, he had the social-emotional qualities that were necessary for success. He was disciplined, he was resilient, he was competitive, he was adaptable, and he was deeply committed to his country and to excellence. And therefore, it's important for our tertiary institutions to teach this. You see, once upon a time, you would learn that at home. He obviously got it from there. He got it from his community. It was so natural. It was all around him, reinforcing. He was seeing examples of the behavior. So he was able to imitate and emulate what he saw and brought it to bear on his cricketing skill. But we've seen a severe weakness in our social fabric, where our children are not exposed to that. Just this morning, I was listening to a critique on crop over, and everybody said we had a great crop over, but the concern was the behavior, the conduct. What our children saw and heard. And if we keep feeding them that, that is what they will produce. We have to do for them what Sir Garfield Sobers' community, his school, his family, his parents, around him, what they did for him, we must do for this next generation, so that we intentionally teach our children persistence, self-management, teamwork, integrity, respect, service. But because it's broken in the wider society, it means that we have to integrate those into our school system. Do not take for granted that every child will get that exposure. This is what we owe to the legacy of Sagari if we're going to produce more Sir Garfield St. Alban Sobers in our midst. Just imagine an education system where every child leaves school believing, I have unique strengths, because somebody helped me to see it. And I was able to demonstrate my prowess because we developed it. That my talents matter because I could see a path where my talent could be exercised and used. That excellence is expected of me, that we don't water down for our children what they can be. Help them to see the stars and aim for the stars. This is what we need to do. That hard work is what will transform my potential into achievement. And as a Barbadian, I can compete anywhere in the world. So Garfield demonstrated not only that he was the greatest cricketer, but he demonstrated what is possible when extraordinary talent is combined with discipline and intelligence and courage. If we build an education system on that basis, it will produce a generation equipped to lead, innovate, and excel in every single sphere of national life. Just imagine if we were able to produce 5,000 Gary Sobers, or 10, or 20. This country would be rich beyond its imagination. And why does it matter? It matters because economic growth and innovation comes from being able to generate those talents and effectively use them in a country. A diverse economy will require diverse talents. Logical mathematical intelligence produces engineers, researchers, analysts. Spatial intelligence supports architects, designers, inventors. Interpersonal intelligence develops managers, diplomats, and entrepreneurs. Kinesthetic intelligence contributes to sports, health, and skilled trades. Creative and artistic intelligences fuel the cultural and creative industries. When we develop many forms of intelligences, it creates a large pool of innovators and problem solvers capable of generating new industries and new opportunities. When we are able to build a society where people can find a place for their talent, where they don't compare themselves with others who are gifted differently to them, they have a sense of self, a sense of identity, a sense of comfort and high self-esteem. They develop confidence. More people then experience success in their lives. Student engagement in the school system increases. Dropout rates decline. Self-esteem improves. And this is important for us as a small island state because as a republic, Barbados cannot rely on size or natural resources alone. Our greatest asset is our people. Greatest asset. And therefore, we have to maximize our human creativity and cultural talent. And to do for this generation of Barbadians and the ones to come, we owe them to create a path that can help them to become the Gary Sobers of their lives. I think one of the things that stands out for me so often in life, people want life to be a straight line, where everything is in order and everything steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it gets there. But life always has twists and turns, and they have to be managed, and that's what Sir Gary did. He demonstrated that a young Barbadian can rise from a small island, from a small village, and become the world's best. This is a valuable lesson for our children. Every gifted child who goes undiscovered represents a loss to our national potential. And this country's future depends on us identifying and nurturing the talent that exists. For Barbados, this will be one of the most important investments this country can make in its future when it pays attention to the development of the potential of its young people. This Ministry of Technological and Vocational Training, our aim and our pledge to this country is to become our national partner, become the national partner for the development of the skills and intelligences of our people. And on a more personal note, Sir Garfield Sobers shares the same birthday as my father. And one of the things that helped and comforted me as a child, I was born left-handed. And I lived through the era of Southpaw, or the devil, a day's work, you're writing with the wrong hand, all those kinds of things. And it always made you feel outside of the mainstream because you weren't right-handed. But I remember I was about 6 or 7 years old when I learned that Sir Garfield Sobers was left-handed, and my world became right after that. And I always thank him for it. I had the opportunity once to share that with him and to thank him because it made a difference to my life. We will never know the full value of the impact he has had on thousands of people. But believe me, your father, your grandfather will live forever because what he has deposited will live out from generation to generation. I thank you. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for St. George South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to join this debate to pay tribute to a man whose name has become inseparable from history of this country, the history of West Indies cricket, and indeed the history of the game of cricket itself. Sir Garfield Sobers, they are cricketers who have great records. They are also cricketers who have had great moments. And they are cricketers who have become famous. And then there are the very few who became part of the mythology of the game. That's the very few. And Sir Garfield Sobers, he belonged to the race category. That's why so many persons find it difficult to write about Sir Gary and to speak about Sir Gary. I'll begin by sharing my own personal perspective before I get into the writings, because I will speak only for 10 or 15 minutes because we have a number of speakers who indeed adore the legend. And I will say to you, the legend is not out. It still lives on. But as a young cricketer back then, I had the opportunity to play in the Sir Garfield Sobers tournament representing the Lodge School back in those days, in the 80s, Gregory, member for St. Thomas. And it is there that I met Brian Charles Lara. Actually, my school played against a team from Trinidad. And Sir Gary happened to be at that game. And it is then that I first encountered him personally. But I never got to speak with him because indeed when you are in the company of Sir Charles Lara, you know you are batting all down in number 50 because Sir Gary came then to see Brian Charles Lara. And I recall Lara scored 100 in that game. Now, Loudon had a fast bowler then. But we know very well that cricket, as CLR James acutely defined the meaning of West Indian cricket. And he said that they were representatives of the people. He wrote that West Indies cricketers, and I quote, were not a personage remote to be read about in papers and worshipped from afar. They were all over the place, ready to play in any match and ready to talk. The observation is particularly appropriate when we remember Sir Garfield Sobers. He was never remote. He was always connected to the people. That is part of what made him so powerful. He did not only belong to Kensington, he did not only belong to the Bayland. He belonged to Barbados. He belonged to the Caribbean, the West Indies, and it belonged to the world. Earlier this morning, I mentioned to his son, Daniel, I think it was in the year 2022 that I journeyed to China. I think I was Minister of Commerce and Business then. And I had the opportunity to stay in England for, I think it was a night in the first instance. And I stayed in a hotel down from the High Commission office. And that hotel, when I got to the hotel and I checked in, the owner of the hotel heard I was from Barbados, and he rushed to the front desk, said, "You're from Barbados? I have a lovely room here called the Cigar-Free Sober Suite that I will put you in. Let me see if it is empty." But it so happened the room was not empty. It was occupied by the most Honourable Desmond Haynes. But little did I know, when I returned from China, I stayed in the same hotel for a night. But I had the opportunity to enter the room. And guess who occupied the room that night? Cigar-Free Sobers and his partner, who cooked some lovely Indian food. And I recall that night because I enjoyed the food. And I enjoyed the engagement with Sagari and the Most Honourable Desmond Haynes, among some others. And that was the measure of the man. Willing to engage, and asked me how politics was doing me. He said, "You know, politicians have a very difficult job." And there we were discussing my trip to China and what I went to do and how I was doing. And it's there that I opened up with him and I let him know, you know, my dad played cricket with you. My dad was born, I heard the member for St. James South spoke about her dad sharing the same birthday. But my dad shared the same year, 1936. My dad born the 18th of July, when Sagari born the 20th. So they came along in the same era. And my dad had the opportunity to go to trials for Barbados with the likes of Charlie Griffith, but of course he was not that good to make the team. But nonetheless, cricketers in those days were not just cricketers. And Sagari indeed was part of the social fabric of this country. I enjoyed going to Kensington as a member of the BCA and as the president of a cricket club. I still do, go to cricket to listen to the legends, listen to Sagari as we sit in the BCA room, the box, give us stories, and most of it, he would often say how this young man is batting. He needs to adjust his stance. He may get caught in the slip. And that was Sagari, commentating from the stand, telling the young men and the young women the challenges with their technique. And we heard of stories how he went to Holders Hill and he was able to correct a flaw in Philo Wallace's batting. That was the measure of the man. The story of Sagari, a boy from Barbados, begins not with a knight, not with a national hero, not with a world-famous cricketer. It begins with a boy, a Barbadian boy who discovered that he possessed extraordinary talent and a gift. The boy who would eventually become the man who cricket writers would struggle to describe adequately. C.L.R. James understood the connection between cricket and people, and he used the word identity, dignity to describe Sagari. And I think it was Ian Woolward who is a wisdom writer, he gave us one of the most beautiful descriptions of Sagari. He wrote that across 2 decades, Sobers brought to cricket a vibrancy, a nobility of spirit, and versatility of accomplishment that transcended all statistics. And I heard the Prime Minister this morning, she said a similar thing. Sagari was more than his statistics showed. 8,032 test runs, 26 test centuries, 235 test wickets, a 365 not out, 6 sixes. But the statistics cannot tell you what it was like to watch Sagari. I only had the opportunity to watch videos of Sagari. I never saw him in person play. But the statistics cannot tell you what it meant to see that left-handed batsman move to the crease. They cannot capture the elegance. They cannot capture the imagination. And they cannot capture the sense that something extraordinary might happen whenever Sobers was involved. That's why Woodward's words are so important. His greatness transcended statistics. When I entered public life in this government in 2018, the first thing I did was to take a portrait of Sagari. And I admire all cricketers. Malcolm Marshall is my favorite bowler. I won't say who's the favorite batter. But I admire cricketers and I played cricket. But one thing that I did when I came to public life in 2018, I took a portrait of Sagari and I framed the portrait, of course, with his collar up. That signifies something to me, not arrogance, but that signified to me that I'm sure about myself, and this is what I'm going to do when I get to that crease. It's all about scoring runs and taking wickets and representing West Indies. And I framed that portrait, and everywhere I went, ministry to ministry, I took that picture, that portrait. It is finally in my TV room where I relax. The only portrait of a cricketer I have in my home. And I'm a cricketer. Was a cricketer. Member for St. Thomas, was a cricketer. And that's the only portrait of a cricketer that I have. But for me, it was more than cricket. For me, I was telling myself something. If the ordinary boy from the Bayland rose to greatness, I was telling myself, and I told myself then, that you in 2018 was chosen by the people to represent them. You in 2018 was given the opportunity by the Prime Minister to become a minister of this government. A poor boy from St. George, Allerton St. George. And I was telling myself, this is my standard bearer here, Sagari. And I moved from ministry to ministry with that photo. It gave me not only inspiration, but it gave me the opportunity that when I spoke to those young men in Allerton and Greens, not only about cricket, but about personal excellence and civics, that you can become the best that you aspire to be in whatever field you chose to be. And when I go to the primary schools to conduct motivational talks yearly, I use examples of Sagari, and I tell them, the sky is your limit. Reach for the stars. The usual phrases that we say to these young people: if you want to be a carpenter, be the best carpenter there ever was. If you want to be a cricketer, be the Garfield Sobers that there was. And those were the lessons that we continue to promulgate and give to our young people from school to school in the neighborhood, at my cricketing club, Malvern. We aspire for cricketing excellence. And not only in cricket on the field, but off the field. I think it was Nelson Mandela who said that sports has the potential to unite the world. And for me, growing up in the village, cricket was what united the communities across St. George. Actually, it was my involvement in cricket, and I can say to you, it was my involvement in cricket as an under-15 cricketer and an under-19 cricketer that I became popular in St. George South, the constituency that I represent, from 2013 to present. It is from cricket, true cricket. It united the communities. And when I decided to enter public life, I had a profile that I did not even know that I had because of cricket. Among other things, but I used cricket. In the year 2023, I had the opportunity as well, and I think it is a memory that will stay with me. I had the opportunity, we held a function, I was the Minister of Sports then, we held a function at the gymnasium, Sir Garfield Sobers Gymnasium, in his honor, because he was proposed to be inducted in the Hall of Fame in New York, Connecticut, sorry. But he could not travel because we had challenges of COVID. I recall the deputy chairman of the Sports Council, then he knows about this. A member for St. Joseph was the deputy chairman then. And we presented Sir Gary then with a token of our appreciation. And I went off on a trip to represent Sir Gary, to receive a token of appreciation from America, Cricket America, they call it then. And of course, he was inducted in the Hall of Fame. It was one of the most joyous occasions for me. You know what it is like to go to receive an honor on behalf of Sir Gary? I still have those pictures. Perhaps I should frame those pictures and place them next to the picture of Sir Gary that I have in my home. That memory will live on with me. Indeed, we went further. During COVID, it was difficult to play sports. And we saw the opportunity at the Sir Garfield Sobers Gymnasium to create something more memorial in his honor. And we remodeled one of the rooms, and we called it the Sir Garfield Sobers Suite. And that suite, Daniel and family members, that suite has a wallpaper of Sir Garfield Sobers, memories of Sir Garfield Sobers, stories, as well as cricket photos. And I will invite the family, well, the minister is here, a member for St. John. Daniel told me he has not seen that room as yet, and I think the family should take a journey to the Sir Garfield Sobers Gymnasium to have a look at that room. I am sorry Matthew has left, but I know he'll be back. And it is one of the things that this government has done in honor of Sir Garfield Sobers. And we continue to do things in his honor. But I believe successive governments could have done more on behalf of Sir Gary over the years. For a man who has captured the imagination of not only cricketing nations across the world, but other nations, as the greatest cricketer ever, the greatest cricketer the world has ever seen. I believe more could have been done for him during his lifetime here on this earth. And this is not criticizing any person in particular. But sometimes we lose sight of these things because as days go by, we too glorify in his excellence And we don't often stop and say, hey, look, I believe this can be done or should be done. And I'm happy to know that this government will rename the Bay Primary School in his honor. But I believe a lot more should have been done then. Between those years, those glory years where cricket placed Barbados on the map as one of the greatest cricketing nations, or the greatest cricketing nation there ever was back in the 60s and the 70s. Not only Sir Gary, but the other legends and the other icons who brought such fame and honor to this country. But the complete cricketer that Sir Gary was, he was not simply the batsman, and I heard the member for St. Michael Southeast and also the Prime Minister this morning. He was a bowler, a fielder, and he was a wicket keeper. But for me, the greatest honor was the humility, the vibrancy, the nobility of spirit, and the versatility of accomplishment. Sir Garfield Sobers was a simple and humble man who had time for every person, even vagrants. And that's the measure of the man. And I want to say, as I close this morning, his innings was well played. It was a magnificent innings. He had a magnificent life. And his legacy will never be out. On behalf of the people of St. George South, on behalf of my cricket club and the other sporting clubs of St. George South, we say a thank you to the family for lending us Sir Gary. We say a thank you to the family for giving us the opportunity to pay a tribute to him. And we say a thank you to the family that you are here this morning to hear the stories about Sir Gary. Some of us have lived stories, and some of us have stories that were told to us. But you are here this morning because this government cares, and this government believes strongly. The national hero was indeed the greatest cricketer that ever lived on this earth and on Mars. I thank you.
Honourable Member for St. John.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too want to rise to pay tribute to the great man. When I took up the role as Minister of Sports, one of the first things I did was to travel to Sir Garfield's house with Jamal Smith, because at that time, the tournament that carried his name was on pause, and I felt a need to restart that particular tournament. So we went to his home, one, to get his blessings to restart, and two, to make sure that he signed off on that tournament. And a couple of things struck me on that day. The first one was fear, I must say, because when we got to the house, there was a big dog, and he said, no worries, and we proceeded to join him on the inside. The other thing was the fact that we were in the presence of the GOAT in relation to cricket, and I will break that down a little further. And the fact that this man was so humble, and based on all of the information that I would have received before in terms of the fact that he came from humble beginnings, I think that probably was the only thing that he and I had in common. But there's a template that he left on this rock in relation to sportsmen and how they should traverse that journey in sports. Now, my sport is basketball, and the jury is still out in relation to who is the GOAT in basketball. You hear Michael Jordan, you hear Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and it goes on and on. In cricket, from my research and what we in sports call the GOAT, it is very, very evident that Sir Garfield was that individual. And I will share, Mr. Speaker, from my notes, the attributes of those that we deem to be the GOAT as it relates to sports. And for those persons who are not initiated in sports, GOAT, the greatest of all time. And you know, there's some areas that I will call here, and the truth is that in basketball, if I was to run this particular list, there's several of the areas here that would not pertain to those names that I just called. But when I was doing this, I recognized that every single one can be attributed to Sir Garfield Sobers. One, exceptional performance, and this relates to consistently performing at the highest level against top competition. Box tick. Outstanding achievements, and I don't need to go over that because you would have heard this morning, winning major championships, titles, medals, and setting records. Box tick. Longevity. The fact that he was able to sustain the high level for such a long period of time, maintain elite performance over many years rather than just a short peak. And we know individuals that they come and they impact at a particular point in time and then they fade. This was not so with the great one. Consistency, number 4, delivers excellent results season after season for a prolonged period. Number 5, skill and talent. Clearly, it was embedded in the great one. Display extraordinary technical ability, athleticism, and game intelligence. Number 6, mental toughness. Perform well under pressure and at the biggest moments. And this was part of his forte. Number 7, leadership. Inspires teammates, set high standards, and often elevate those around him. Mr. Speaker, in team sport, and I dabble in coaching at some point in time, you always require one of your players to be that individual to step forth and be able to guide the others to the finish line. Number 8, work ethics and discipline. Demonstrates dedication to training, preparation, and continuous improvement. And from all that we would have read and all that I would have heard, this is something that was innate within Sir Garfield Sobers. Adaptability. Succeeds despite changes in opponents, rules, or difficult conditions. And it is obvious from what we would have seen and heard that he was able to transcend any particular condition on a given day that he was playing cricket. Sportsmanship. Shows respect for opponents, officials, teammates, and the spirit of the game. This, again, was part of that great one's journey. The influence on the sport, changes how the game is played, inspired future generations, or grow the sport's popularity. And we would have heard before how many people would have wanted to mimic Sir Garfield in terms of his contribution and what he did. Number 12, resilience. Overcome setbacks such as injuries, defeat, or personal challenges, and return to excel. Mr. Speaker, 12 attributes of those sporting icons that we attach that label, the GOAT, to. And clearly, like I said, every single one of those can be ticked by Sir Garfield Sobers. Mr. Speaker, government is cognizant of the fact that cricket is part of our DNA in Barbados, and we are doing some stuff at the Ministry of Sports and as a government to ensure that we are able to have maybe someone emerge in relation to mimicking some of the things that I identify here. The truth is that I'm not sure that we will find that particular cricketer who will hit every single one of these areas that I would have identified. I hope that that is the case, but I know how difficult it is to aspire to hit 12 areas that you can reach the stage of being called a GOAT. But what is it that we're doing? The National Sports Council, we have the Herman Griffith tournament that is up and running. And one of the things that we're doing there is hoping that talent identification, and the honorable member for St. James South would have mentioned that talent identification is in place because one of the things that we're trying to do is to unearth those diamonds in the rough to make sure that we can have the continuity of cricket being played on island at a very high standard. One of the other things that the government is doing, we have started the process of developing the old Blenheim Sports Council complex where we have 5 practice pitches at that location, in addition to 2 bowling machines and video cameras, to make it possible that those youngsters who are really interested in cricket will have a location, a facility where they can go and practice to the highest level. I heard one of the honourable members before who mentioned the fact that Sir Garfield's mode of transportation back then was a bicycle. Now we have individuals who are going to practice and being dropped off by the most expensive rides. But if the innate ability is not there, no matter what ride that you traverse in will not get you to reach that particular area. And I want our youngsters on island who are involved not only in cricket, but other areas of sports to see what is possible in relation to dedication, what is possible to, if you believe in yourself, what can happen at the end of the day. And I'm absolutely sure that Sir Garfield, when he started out, that this was not necessarily his end game, to be now a national hero and for us to treat him with the type of respect that he truly deserved. But this is an opportunity. It is an opportunity for our youngsters to study his life and to see what it is that happened in terms of his development. One of the first things that I asked for, Mr. Speaker, when I became Minister of Sports, and right now government would have spent in excess of $50 million in relation to infrastructural development on island. And one of the things that I asked for, one of the things that I'm asking private sector to partner with government to do is to construct and establish a National Sports Hall of Fame. I believe, Mr. Speaker, that the time is right for us to be able to have that Hall of Fame on the landscape in this country. And by that, visitors who come to this island should be able to go into that Hall of Fame and scan a QR code and be able to get all of the information in relation to Sir Garfield, all of the information in relation to our sporting heroes on island. And I believe, like I said, the time is right for private sector to come on board to make that a possibility. Mr. Speaker, I can only humbly suggest that in relation to perpetuating the memory of Sir Garfield, I want to humbly suggest that on the 28th, his birthday be made a national holiday. That would be for us locally, because then every little boy in the constituency of St. John who on the 28th asks, what is this holiday about, will be able to get a story in terms of why we're celebrating Sir Garfield's birthday. In addition to that, I think that we should also do a commemorative stamp, because that stamp then will be for those external, not only for us here, but external to the country. So individual tourists who come to watch cricket at Kensington should be able to purchase a stamp that will allow them forevermore to be able to say, well, I have a Sir Garfield Strawberry stamp. And hopefully, if it is a case where we impact enough with that, then a fund can be started to assist other youngsters who may need some type of stepping stone in relation to purchasing gear that we know that is expensive, or whoever is responsible for that fund will be able to put that particular money from the commemorative stamp into a purpose that all of us are satisfied with. Mr. Speaker, sports is big. Sports is a billion-dollar industry. I can only imagine at this point in time where we have the CPL, IPL, and all of these different things, what would have happened if we had Sir Garfield participating in those tournaments. Mr. Speaker, I really believe that what is being done by government, we heard about the renaming of the school, is a plus, because it is important that we understand, especially when we have individuals that come from humble beginnings and reach the kind of levels. And Mr. Speaker, like I said, I was struck by the fact of how humble this man was. And when we walk on this island and you see individuals with letters before and after their name, and you see them moving and walking as if they're on cloud nine, it makes you wonder how come that a man who achieves so much more than they can ever achieve with their letters, either before or after, was able to remain humble and be able to share his knowledge with cricketers as well. And we heard Brian Lara at the funeral indicating the fact of how Sir Garfield was able to share with him things in relation to his batting. So it is a case where his knowledge was not in a silo, and he believed, well, this is me, I have achieved, and then I'm hoarding all the information for myself. He was prepared to share that knowledge to better some of our cricketers who also reach the international level. And I think that that is the hallmark of a man who understood that I was able to climb up the ladder, and I'm not going to kick it down. I'm going to share my information with those who came before me. Mr. Speaker, I plan to make a short intervention here to pay tribute, and I want to close by saying, may his soul rest in eternal peace, and may his memories be that glorious for all of us in relation to his work. I thank you. I'm obliged.
Honourable Member for St. Thomas.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in solemn reverence to mark the passing of the Right Excellent Sir Garfield St. Auburn Sobers, a national hero of Barbados, a global sporting icon, a son of the working class, whose bat and ball became instruments of liberation, dignity, and pride for the peoples of the Caribbean. It is universally acknowledged that the Right Excellent Sir Garfield Sobers was indeed the greatest cricketer that the world has ever seen. And some would be tempted to argue that he was something far more than the world's greatest cricketer. And why do I place that statement, which may sound like a paradox, at the beginning of my tribute, sir? I come today, sir, to make this tribute and confess that I am a convert and strong believer and committed to the school of the great man C.L.R. James, who wrote in that famous book, Beyond the Boundary, what do they know of cricket who only cricket know? He was obviously then inspired by Kipling's poem, The English Flag, which was written before that book by C.L.R. James to celebrate the British Empire and its global reach. But what C.L.R. James meant when he said, what do they know of cricket who only cricket know, was that if you truly understood the game, you're not just looking at the scores and the rules or the performances of the players. To know cricket, you must understand the history, the politics, the race, and the society, because it represented something far more transcendent. And Sir Garfield, if I may call him that for the rest of this tribute, was more symbolical than cricket. He was the first internationally global icon that this nation has ever produced, and indeed our West Indian society has produced. 3 years before Sir Garfield Sobers was born here in Barbados. One of the first great West Indian cricketers, Sir Larry Constantine, wrote a book, his autobiography called Cricket and I. And in that book, Mr. Speaker, he said that cricket was the most glaring example of a black man being kept in his place. And that is the first thing that we will change. It was an affirmation that those great cricketers understood that it was more than a game. It was a sport introduced by the colonizer, a sport designed to reinforce the imperial hierarchies and enforce cultural domination. For decades, it remained the preserve of the elites. In the very community in the Bayland in which Sir Garfield was born and raised, the sectors of sporting domination stood all around him. The Garrison, the Wanderers Cricket Club. He could not, and St. Anne's Fort. He could not enter into those institutions to play any sport. Indeed, when he played cricket for Barbados, he did not have the liberty of walking through the gate at the pavilion to go onto the field, because the professionals, as they were then called, were separated from the merchant and planter class elite that ran the Caribbean Society and indeed Barbados and owned the Pickwick Club. They had to walk through the back door, go through between the two stands to enter the field, because only the entrance to the field was the preserve of the whites. And I begin this way because Sir Garfield transcended that. How can a dismembered people be remembered? How can they relaunch themselves from a world of non-being in a colonial era into a world of being? How can these peoples recapture their social and historical identity? How can they recapture their language and their knowledge systems? It is a fact, sir, that the dismemberment of the colonial peoples who suffered for hundreds of years under a system of slavery, and then in a process after slavery, prior to independence, an era in which Sir Garfield was born. That dismemberment simultaneously fueled the development of Europe, but also dislocated the African peoples from the continent and fragmented us into a number of Caribbean societies. This was the social era in which Sir Garfield emerged. But in the Caribbean, sir, cricket is indeed more profound than that. While it is true that our societies have been transformed by cricket, it is fair to say that cricket has been transformed by the Caribbean society. And Sir Garfield, sir, lies at the apex of that transformation. Our people transformed cricket, sir, into a stage of resistance. That is why Constantine wrote, it is the first thing we will have to change in the social structure of the Caribbean societies. We change it, sir, from a dull, boring tedium of medium pace and unflattering cricket, and transformed it into a stage of resistance, a theater of emancipation, and a platform for excellence that shattered social distinctions in Caribbean societies like race and class and the cultural stereotypes that were the hallmark of the Victorian era, the prototype of the fledgling British colonies across the world. And sir, that is the world in which Sir Garfield was born. And when the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central referred to Frank, The legendary Frank, who was the man on the bicycle. The legend is, sir, that even before he made his debut for Barbados, he was such a legend that he never went a weekend without scoring 100. And even if he would fail at a cricket match, Frank was there on a bicycle to take him as soon as he got out to another match, because 2 and 3 and 4 teams wrote him down in the 11 because he was such a prodigious talent. But so Garfield Sobers consolidated a revolution that transformed not only cricket in the West Indies, but cricket globally, and indeed the whole Caribbean society. That is because he was the first black man to receive was not the first, sir. He was the second. So Frank Worrell was the first black man to captain the West Indies team. Because all until 1960, as great as the 3Ws were, as great as George Henley was, and the team that emerged in the 1950s from 1948 onwards, we beat England for the first time at Lord's in 1950. But we struggled because West Indians cricket had to be captained by a white man. Batting at 10 and 11 and not contributing with the ball. Paid more than the players whose legendary exploits dot the pages of history, the newspapers, the magazines, the columns about these cricket performances. Had to be white to captain the West Indies team. And there were no apologies about that. But Sir Frank Worrell, sir, who must be credited in the Sir Garfield Sobers story, became the first black captain of the West Indies team in 1960. Sir Frank mentored Sir Gary. Not only did Sir Gary succeed Sir Frank as the West Indies captain in 1963, but Sir Gary succeeded Sir Frank at the Radcliffe Cricket Club in the Lancashire Leagues. And many, many stories are told and written in the biographies of both Sir Frank and Sir Gary as to how that father figure, that mentorship, led to the development of this prodigious talent that was not allowed to go astray by the village academy, starting with Frank, the bicycle man, and Sir Frank, the captain. They roomed together. When Sir Frank came back into the team, Sir Frank Worrell, because he too had a brush with the cricket authorities demanding equal and better pay and treatment for the black professionals in the West Indies team in the 1940s and 50s, and was told by the West Indian planter elite that ran the cricket, boy, know your place. And Frank was committed to Constantine's mission of cricket being the glaring example of a black man being kept in his place. That is the first thing we will change. Took a sabbatical and went to the University of Manchester and came back to West Indies cricket after captaining the Commonwealth team tour to India and captaining the rest of the world. Could not captain Barbados, Sir Frank. Could not captain the West Indies, but was captaining the rest of the world on tours to India and Pakistan and Sri Lanka at the time. Recognized for his great skill, opening up the doors for this prodigy called Sir Garfield Sobers to come. So when Sir Garfield is rooming with Sir Frank, you got to understand that in the making of this man in whom we pay tribute today, the foundation was laid by a village academy that included Frank on the bicycle and Sir Frank Worrell, the leader. He made sure that Sir Gary was able to make a living in the early days because they were not being paid well by the West Indies Cricket Board of Control at the time because of the color of the skin, even though he would have broken Sir Len Hutton's record of 364. That leadership, sir, provided what I consider to be a revolution. Because while Sir Frank was nearing retirement and they were completing claims from the Caribbean intelligentsia at the time, that someone else should succeed Sir Frank. There were claims in Barbados that another great Barbadian cricketer, Sir Conrad Hunt, a man with a university degree, who was the established opening batsman and doing very well by international standards, had a better claim than Sir Gary. But Sir Frank understood the revolution and the social importance of cricket at that time as a metaphor. And for Sir Gary to be a man of working class origins, the first man without a university degree to captain the West Indies team. But Sir Frank was there as manager. Because the West Indies Cricket Board knew they could not get around Sir Frank. If they had their way, Sir Gary would not be the captain. But Sir Frank was so powerful at that time, he retired as captain and became the manager and said the issue of the captaincy is not up for discussion. It goes to Sir Garfield Sobers. And Sir Garfield Sobers therefore consummated that revolution, that social revolution in West Indian cricket that we too often refuse to talk about in these countries in the West Indies. Because cricket is just a sport. What do they know of cricket who only cricket know? As C.R. James has said. What do they know of cricket? Sir Garfield's leadership led the West Indies to beat Australia in a test series for the first time. He mind the Australian team. And under Sir Garfield's leadership, the West Indies team for the first time beat everybody home and away twice under his leadership. We don't talk about that. And it confirmed that we are people too. We in the West Indies, a dismembered people, are now remembered within the pantheon of the world society. Sir Garfield led the West Indies team, and it was not about just cricketing tactics, Mr. Speaker. It was about the social transformation, that affirmation that we had the intelligence to take the English game and to transform it from a dull village pastime played by elites across the world to a place where in the Caribbean it is the only place in the world where it is the sport of the working class. We took the Victorian concept of the four C's, the classics, the church, and the canes, and added cricket. And why do I say that? The English came with their cultural baggage. They brought the Victorian education system, the elite schools, where the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central made the point. It was played only in the elite schools. It was not a national pastime all across the British Empire. The classics, that's the education system. The Anglican Church, High Church Anglicanism, was spread by the empire to be the national state religion. And the canes represents the social economic mode of production in the plantation societies. But cricket too was part of the English baggage of colonization and colonialism. But it is only in the West Indies that these great men, starting with George Headley and Constantine in the early 1920s and 30s, consummated by Sir Frank and led to its most magnificent apex by Sir Garfield Sobers in the 1960s to complete that social transformation where those persons who were located in the gullies and on the beaches and on the byways who could not get into the cricket clubs. Sir Garfield didn't get into the established cricket clubs because he could not be a member, not even of the black cricket clubs, the middle class clubs like Spartan and Empire, who had West Indian cricketers at the time. So he had, at 16 years, to go and play for the police band. Captain Farmer, whose name was mentioned today, was a Barbadian cricketer, police chief at the time, but a member of Wanderers, where just a stone's throw away from the Bayland, it would have been impossible for Sir Garfield to play at. But these great men led that transformation, Mr. Speaker. Sir Garfield's cricket, sir, was bold and exciting and enthralling, sir. He played with artistry. If you watch the videos, you see a languidness, a powerful languidness, redefining what the game could be. 6 sixes in an over, effortless batting, never committing to the front foot, the mastery of bowling, the leopard-like movements in the field to catch close to the wicket or at any other point. These were not just feats of sports. They were declarations of freedom. A freedom in which he evolved in a society that did not afford him at the time the ability to make a living off the game that he became the best in the world. Sir Frank, Sir Gary, and those titans, they told the world that black people and brown people of the Caribbean, once enslaved, once colonized, could reach the halcyon heights of international cricket. And no one in the world did it better than Sir Gary. They brought, sir, the colonial mood, turning the game into Caribbean identity, resilience, and creativity. And it forced the world to change the rules. Not only did they change the one bouncer over rules, but for the first time in the middle of a test match, at Lord's, the MCC met to change the LBW rules. I believe it would be Gravy and them came up with big pads to blunt the West Indian bowlers, and the umpires refused to give them up because they changed the rules in the middle of the game because these people from the colonies were beating them at their own game. These are stories, Mr. Speaker, that we do not tell often enough because the rules of international law, morality, the conduct of war, the conduct of business and finance are often changed to our disadvantage, and that has never changed. Cricket is the most glaring example of a black man being kept in his place, and that is the first thing that we will have to change. Remain, sir, an enduring metaphor. Sir Garfield, therefore, was more than a cricketer. He was a national hero, sir, whose life intersected with the broader currents of the Caribbean social economic transformation. His career unfolded and reached certain heights during the era of our independence, when our nations started to first redefine themselves beyond the colonial confines of that British construct of classics, canes, church, and cricket. It was Sobers's brilliance on the field that became a mirror of our own collective journey, Mr. Speaker. From subjugation to sovereignty to self-government. From silence to self-expression. That virtuoso, that artist on the cricket field, that dazzling ray of brilliance performed consistently over time. It imposed an identity, a self-identity, and a self-determination that has long been a hallmark of the people of the Caribbean. It built up the confidence that later generations led by Lloyd and Richards in the early days, sir, after independence and self-government came to the Caribbean nations to lead the world in resistance to the continuing of the colonial experiment long past, the time when the world recognized that injustice was still the order of the day. Mr. Speaker, in mourning the Right Excellent Sir Garfield Sobers, this Parliament today celebrates a life that was both extraordinary and emblematic. He was the finest cricketer the world has ever seen, Mr. Speaker. But more importantly, he was the symbol of a Caribbean culture, a Caribbean vibe, a Caribbean ethos, a spirit that carry the hopes of many people of the region, and I hope will remain an enduring symbol of who we are. He was a national hero whose life intersected the broader dimensions of the Caribbean political and social transformation. He was a symbol, sir, and will long remain the symbol of who we are and who we want to be. Sir, in closing, I would hope that this country seeks to perpetuate the memory and the life and the legacy of the great Sir Garfield Sobers. There is a Sir Garfield Sobers International Tournament. When it started out, it was the Sir Garfield Sobers Schools International Tournament that brought schools from all over the world to Barbados in the late 1980s, early 1990s. It is no longer an international schools tournament because teams are coming from all over the world, made up of some national teams, made up of some schools, and the tournament is now played not in the way it was originally intended. I would like, Mr. Speaker, for that tournament to return as an international schools tournament. We have to do more to honor the legacy of Sir Gary. And more work can be done to attract some of the best schools in the world to come to Barbados in the summer to play in this tournament. Sir, when I watch the footage of the long room at Lord's on the day of the funeral, long room at St. John's Woods, standing room only, watching the live stream of the funeral, it tells me that we have sat down and allowed that tournament to move into something else. That might be deliberate, but I feel more needs to be done where we get the best schools from all over the world to come to Barbados. I also believe, Mr. Speaker, in honoring Sir Garfield's legacy, that we need to complete Kensington Oval. And what do I mean by that? The government has spent 2 years ago millions of dollars to upgrade Kensington Oval to host a World Cup, and it was a fine World Cup in 2024. But Kensington Oval is unfinished for two reasons, in my view. There is no honors board. All the great cricket grounds of the world have an honors board, centuries in cricket and 5-wicket halls. But what is more, beyond Test cricket, there have been many great feats occurring at Kensington Oval. And the walls on the outside, the internal walls, can be a canvas of those great memories. There must be a Sir Garfield Sobers museum at Kensington Oval, if we call it the Mecca. And he is the greatest cricketer that the world has ever seen. Well, then the Mecca should have a Sir Garfield Sobers museum depicting his legacy and his contribution to Barbados, West Indies, and international cricket. I believe so. We need to give Kensington that lift. Let us honor him not only with words, but by contributing to the continuation of the legacy that he embodied. A revolution of dignity, sir, fairness, and excellence. What do they know of cricket who only cricket know? To Matthew, Daniel, Genevieve, the other members of the Sobers family, on behalf of the people of St. Thomas, I offer you this tribute, and I hope that Sir Garfield's memory will continue to inspire generations of Barbadians to come. I hope that his story is retold and constantly kept in mind as to how a dismembered people became remembered and reordered within the world society from a colonial legacy to the heights of global excellence. May the Right Excellent Sir Garfield Sobers rest in eternal peace. I'm obliged to you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member St. Peter.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. When I was getting ready to leave home this morning, I put on my shirt, and before I put on my tie, my collar was up. And I thought about what the reaction would be if I came into this honorable chamber, the one you, Mr. Speaker, have the honor to preside over, with my collar up. My mind went back to a predecessor of mine, JTC Ramsey, James Tarleton Collymore Ramsey, after whom the roundabout by the Busser statue is named. And he came into this chamber, this very chamber, in 1942 with in his blue overalls. And he caused a stir. And I, Mr. Speaker, made the connection between JTC Ramsey, this Parliament's first chair of committees, and the Right Excellent Sir Garfield St. Auburn Sobers. And I recognize, Mr. Speaker, that by their attire, they were making a statement that said they were not satisfied with the status quo. And while they did not have the kind of influence maybe in the society at the time when they began to make the statement, they developed a method of making a very strong statement. A statement that said, we are here to change things. We are here to make a difference. Now, Mr. Speaker, I did not know Sir Garfield as a friend because, we were obviously in different eras. But I got to know him in my tourism life on the stand at World Travel Market. Sir Gary on the stand, on the Barbados stand at World Travel Market, meant that all roads led in that large facility in London, all roads led to the Barbados stand. All roads led to the Barbados stand because a global icon was on the stand, was present, and was there engaging with everybody who would come to the stand. His draw, and it's been said by a number of persons who have already spoken, but decades after he played his last match, there were still people lining up to touch him, to shake his hand, to get an autograph, because his greatness appeared to transcend time. That was the measure of the man who we honor today in this tribute in this honorable chamber. But Mr. Speaker, in this short presentation, this short tribute, I want to speak to a matter that arose when he was originally chosen to be our national hero in 1998. And this is the way that I will present my thinking. Mr. Speaker, I want you to allow me to say that I am glad that Sir Garfield St. Auburn Sobers was not a perfect man. I am happy that Sir Garfield was not a perfect man, because if he were, then we would treat him as a god. I am glad he was not a perfect man because as a mortal like me, he represents for me and all others what an imperfect being can do with the application of discipline and hard work added to natural ability and talent. In that way, Mr. Speaker, he does what I believe a national hero should do. A national hero should motivate a nation. A national hero should motivate its people to recognize that in spite of background, in spite of limitations, in spite of imperfections, we can reach world-class standards. We can be the best in spite of ourselves, in spite of those things that others may consider to be limiting factors. So that Sir Garfield, Mr. Speaker, has, in spite of everything, background, growing up, difficulties, challenges, imperfections, he has been able to inspire Barbados. He's been able to inspire Barbadians. He's been able to inspire a world. And Mr. Speaker, standing here representing the constituency of St. Peter, coming after JTC Ramsey, I can say to you that the late Right Excellent Sir Garfield St. Albans Sobers has inspired many in St. Peter. Sir Garfield Sobers inspired great cricketers like Keith Boyce, with whom he played for a short time. Inspired Keith Boyce. Sir Garfield inspired Gordon Greenidge. These are all cricketers from St. Peter. Sir Garfield inspired Pamela Levine, Mark Levine, Pedro Collins, Corey Cullimore, Kirk Edwards, Omar Phillips. Sir Garfield Sobers is still inspiring constituents who I represent. And so, Mr. Speaker, I can tell you that the CJM ASAP Builders Boscobel, this is now a Division I cricket team, is also inspired by the exploits, by the example of our late national hero, Sir Garfield St. Albans Sobers. We believe, Mr. Speaker, that greatness is represented both by what a great person presents and gives, but greatness is also represented by the legacy that a great person leaves, how that person inspires others to their own greatness, how that great person is able to influence others to such a degree that those other persons are relentless in their pursuit of excellence. I, Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the people that I represent, those of St. Peter, in the north of the country, far away from where Sir Garfield was born, where he grew up, where he played cricket. He played a lot of cricket in St. Philip. From a people far away from the physical presence of Sir Garfield, I commend his greatness. I commend his humility. I commend his impact. I commend the fact that he was able to bring along with him many others. I commend that approach to all Barbadians, all Caribbean people, to the people of the world. And I say simply to this honorable chamber through you, Mr. Speaker, and to his family through you, that the gift that Sir Garfield is to this country will live on in our hearts. He will continue to inspire us to greatness. he will continue to inspire in us a desire for excellence. He will continue to be for us a guiding star, an imperfect man who can draw out of us excellence and a determination to make an impact in our societies, in this country, and in our world. I'm obliged to you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member Sir Michael North.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Leader, Government Business.
To apologize, Honourable Member. I did suspension.
The question is that this honourable chamber be suspended until 3 p.m. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This honourable chamber stands suspended until 3 p.m.